This is episode 33 of This Makes Me Happy. Research shows that helping others in need improves your happiness. If you're looking for a good cause to help with, please consider giving to the MS Society and help create a world without multiple sclerosis. To learn how, visit thehappypodcast.com/give. Welcome to This Makes Me Happy, a podcast about people and what makes them happy. My name is Bernardo Margulis. I'm a designer, art director, and educator, and I'm the principal of This Makes Me Happy, a studio where I help my clients with branding and visual communications. I'm interested in hearing what makes people happy, so I'm asking them to share through This Makes Me Happy, the podcast. Every week, I will bring a conversation with a new guest on any topic they choose, and we'll learn what makes that person happy. Hello, today I am extremely happy to have Nataly Kogan here with me. Nataly is an entrepreneur, speaker, coach, an artist, and author passionate about helping people design and live their lives to be what they genuinely want. Nataly is the co-founder and CEO of Happier Inc. with one mission in mind, to help you find more moments of joy, kindness, and meaning in your everyday life. Nataly, welcome to This Makes Me Happy. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
And thank you very much for being with me. Else from the introduction, is there anything else you want the audience to know about you?
So many things. Let's see. I have two really fun talents. I can tie a cherry stem with my tongue. I learned this right after college. I thought it was even more impressive than a college degree. My 12-year-old daughter, is very impressed by that. And I can cook and put together a ridiculously awesome meal in under an hour with a fully clean kitchen at the end. It's a magic skill. It's completely, entirely exhausting and stressful, but I love to do it because it's total miracle what happens at the end. Everyone's eating, everyone's happy, the kitchen's clean, and everyone's kind of like, whoa, that was cool. So those are my two fun facts.
Are we talking full 3-course meal?
Oh, we're talking like, yeah, you want to be eating that stuff. And I just have this way. I mean, I grew up in a family. My mom is an amazing cook. You know, my grandma, like the women in my family, really great cooks. So it's sort of a legacy, but the speed and organization, I kind of go into this like crazy ninja mode. Like I can see all the elements that have to get done. And I do them all. I can't talk to anyone. No one can be around me as I do this. It's just like, bam, and then it's done. And like, not only is it an awesome meal, but like, it's all like, my husband usually does the cleanup, of the dishes, and he walks in, he's like, whoa, this is crazy. Where's all the stuff? So yeah, it's just kind of, the food's awesome. It's like one of those things I go into a mode. It's pretty exhausting, but I really love to make people happy with food.
And if that's not impressive enough, you can probably make a cherry pie at the end and just tie the stem with your tongue. And
exactly.
You got a full show.
Oh, a full show.
I wish we went down this route, but I know you have a great answer to the main question. So let's jump to it. Nataly, what makes you happy?
Since I only get to talk about one thing, which is really, I want you to appreciate how much discipline I have to just say one thing. But for the purpose of this, what makes me happy is to create, and mainly create art of all sorts of kinds: visual art, oil art, acrylic art, drawings, and even things like art on a plate. Even this morning, I made art on a plate for my daughter for breakfast. I made her this very artsy-fartsy smiley face from soft-boiled eggs and cucumbers and peaches. And so art. Creating art and bringing it into people's lives in different ways is what makes me jump for joy.
And how do you feel? What does it mean for you to be creating art?
Yeah. So here's the thing. It's actually a really great question. I grew up, in the former Soviet Union and Russia, and, nobody had anything, it was pretty austere life. And so going to experience art was a huge treat. So we would go to museums with our school. My parents and I would go to museums and, theater performances. And so art was a big part of my life, and I was the consumer of it. I also, because we didn't have or any money, creating gifts for each other was pretty early on a tradition. So for every birthday of mine, my dad has always written me a poem. He still does that. I'm 40. He still does that. I would make little drawings for my parents. There'd be a special meal. So to me, from a very early age, it was this idea, creating art, it doesn't have to be a painting. It was creating a piece of something that is beautiful or experiential or makes someone feel something in some way. I often say to my daughter, I remember she's 12 now, from the early months, her first exhibit was a Modigliani, who's my favorite artist, exhibit. She was 3 months old. We dragged her to a Jewish museum in New York City. She cried like throughout the whole thing. But we've been going to museums her whole life. And I often say, Mia, art is not what you see, it's what you feel. So if I had to boil it down, to me, creating art is in some way creating something that didn't exist before, that is both visually and sensory, some kind of a new experience for people who are in some way interacting with it.
And you mentioned a big range of art. You talk from just making on a plate a silly face with the food, all the way up to going to see Modigliani show. Thank you, I got tongue-tied. To making your own oils and watercolors. Do you feel different across that range, or is it all one single experience?
I think what it does for me is it taps into something that's very core to who I am, which is, for me, one of the greatest joys, like I said, I experience when I'm able to create something. It just does that in different ways. When I am, like when I made the little plate of art for my daughter this morning, it was a nice 2 minutes. She's not a morning person. It's really funny. I am. My husband and she are not. And she has to go to camp. She has to get up early. So she's really groggy in the morning. So that was a very quick way for me to tap into that part of me and say, this will make her smile. And it made me smile to do it. It made her smile when she looked at it. And, I put it on Instagram, and it's making all these other people smile. So that was like a small way. When I go, I have this little art studio that I set up in our basement. When I say little, I really mean like very little. It's like 4x6 probably. But when I go down there and I'm working on an oil painting, or I'm trying, I've been into really fun. Like I got neon acrylics recently, and I'm playing with black canvases. When I'm in that space, I'm in a different space. I'm still tapping into that part of me, but it's a much more immersive experience. It goes deeper in me, and everything else kind of pulls further away. So I would say these are different ways to create art. They're tapping into the same core piece of who I am, but just in different ways.
So do you seek one over the other one? Is that a conscious process?
Yeah. So here's kind of how I think about it. I mean, someone called me this the other day. I'm a very practical seeker of joy, meaning, my big definition of happiness, and this is what I teach through Happier, and just kind of something I came to in my own life that really shifted my perspective, is that happiness is not something you feel. It's something that you do. Joy isn't a spontaneous reaction. I mean, sometimes it is. You see, your child, you feel joyful, but what I fundamentally believe is that we can all cultivate these feelings of joy by things we do. And so for me, and the reason I say I'm a practical seeker of joy, is that as much as I would love to spend 5 hours a day painting, that's not the reality of my life, right? I'm busy. I do a lot of things. I work. I have a family. And so it's more that I do try to fit creating art into every single day. It's kind of one of my daily anchors. It's a daily practice that I don't think I could be without, which is funny because for most of my life, for a lot of my life, I was without it a lot. We can talk about why that was. But so creating art is a daily practice. And some days I have, and I'm very grateful for that. I have, like, my daughter was in camp for 2 weeks. And so, my basement is filled with tons of new artworks that I started because when I came home from work, I had, I didn't have to make dinner. I could just go paint. On some days, all I have is 15 minutes to make a quick sketch. And some days all I can do is is make meals that I make for my husband and my daughter a little more artful. So, sometimes it's something I seek. Sometimes it's just the reality, the practicality of a busy schedule. It's what it allows. But I'm actually about to kick off a little tiny project, where I'm going to create a group. I have to figure out if I'm going to do it on Facebook or on Instagram, but for a group to create tiny acts of creativity every day, because I think that so many of us are creative. I actually think to be human is to be creative. You don't have to be an artist to be creative. And I think for many, many people, including me sometimes, not having the time or the skills or the education kind of becomes the stopping thing. Whereas I think if we look at creating art in a much more open way, including tiny ways we can do it, I think many more of us will find it more approachable and make it part of our lives.
It's interesting in my conversation so far. I'm a designer, so it's natural that I talk to a lot of creatives, but so many people have said how creative things make them happy. Do you have any inkling, any idea why creativity can make all of us happy?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of reasons. I think, a philosophical answer, if you would, is I think that the ultimate nature of what it is to be a human being is to create, right? We cannot live our lives, our worlds, our societies cannot continue to go on if we don't create buildings, fire, cooking, art, right? We can't not be. So to me, creating is truly part of, on a philosophical level of who we are as human beings. But I think there's other reasons as well. When we're creating something, we are pretty focused on it. So I think it's really hard to create anything and for your mind to not be there. So we achieve the state of, some people call it a state of flow, which is one way to think about it. I call it a state of just crisp awakeness to what is. When I'm working on my art, that's where I am, right? I am not thinking about my to-do list. I'm not regretting something in the past. I'm not leaning into the future. I'm really in that moment. And if you look at the modern science, if you look at the yogic science and a lot of the Eastern traditions, they've talked about this idea of awareness and mindfulness for tens of thousands of years. But in our modern world, science is showing that we are much happier when our mind is focused on whatever it is we're doing, regardless of what it is. Research has shown that our minds are distracted about 50% of the time. So 50% of the time, what you are doing and what your mind is thinking about are two different things. And that's very stressful. It's chemically stressful for the brain. It's physically stressful for your body. And it's part of the reason it doesn't make us happy. So I think that the reason that being creative makes us so happy is when we are creating, we are awake and aware exactly in that moment. We're practicing mindfulness. We're being present in that moment. And I think that's the number one scientific way in which being creative dramatically contributes to the feelings of joy, of peacefulness, of, the sense of like I am where I am. And that's why, I spend a lot of my time obviously studying the science, the modern science of happiness. I'm also, I do a lot of yoga. I study yoga. I try to live a life of yoga philosophy, not just, as a physical practice. And to me, creativity finds like the commonality of all the sciences. To create, you have to be aware to what is, and to be aware to what is means you're living in this moment. And that to me is the ultimate definition of what it means to feel joy.
I want to jump back to your own personal experience. You mentioned a few minutes ago how there was a time in your life when you didn't have art, and I read your story of how painting came into your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how you found art, how you started doing it, and how that's helped you so far?
It's, I'll try to make it not too long, the story, but, as I mentioned, I grew up in what used to be the Soviet Union. And when I was 13 and a half, my parents and I were Jewish, so we're persecuted, and we were able to get out, and we went to refugee settlements for Russian Jews, first in Vienna and then in Italy, seeking permission to come to the United States. And, the reason I start there is because it was a really rough time. We left with $600 in 6 suitcases. We had nothing else. We didn't have enough citizenship. We were very lucky. Eventually, we were allowed refugee status to come to the United States. We lived in the projects outside of Detroit for a year on welfare, on food stamps, learning English from scratch. It was a really rough couple years. And I emerged out of that. The one way that I figured out how I could not feel the pain of all of that experience was to run really far away in the other direction through achievement. It was around my high school graduation. It was a few years after we immigrated. I was winning all these academic awards, and I realized I'm really good at achieving. I don't fit in. I have all this pain and confusion inside from immigration, but I'm really good at achieving. And the next kind of 15 years of my career, I was a big achiever, and I call it my chase of the big happy. You know, every time I would achieve something, whether it was, you know, graduating at the top of my class in high school or college, or getting an impossible to get job, or starting a company or writing a book, like I felt this bubble of happiness every time I achieved it, and my parents were happy, I was happy. And so I figured I can just blow a lot of these bubbles, and eventually the world will just be one big bubble of happiness, and I'll never have to feel the pain I was feeling inside. And, you know, the story, the punchline is I did achieve a lot. I was really proud of a lot of it. I really am, but it didn't make me happy. I was never there for it. Like what I was talking about, I was never there for those moments. I just kept chasing more and more and more, because that's who we are as human beings. I think a lot of us live this way, as we adapt. So every time we achieve something, we need the new thing. And the reason I make that part of my answer of why my life didn't have art, is I've always loved art. And I dabbled when I lived in Japan during college. I went there to study Japanese and economics, and I fell in love with sumi-e painting, which is, you know, the Chinese, the bamboos and the cherry trees. And I absolutely loved it. And I did it there so much. I actually sold some of my work, and I became quite good at it because I was so passionate about it. And then I came back, and it's like it didn't happen. I never did it again. And I always kind of had this justification that, you know, yeah, like art, I really love it and I want to do it, but it doesn't really fit into my life. It's not a way that I can support my family. It's not a way that I can, you know, advance my career. You know, how does it fit into my story? Like, I'm this like high achieving CEO, writer, entrepreneur. Like, so I just never gave myself permission to do it because I couldn't justify an achievement oriented reason for it. And last year, I turned 40 this past December, and last summer, a little bit before that, I had a really rough couple of years in every possible way, professionally, personally. And the way I can summarize them would be that, this life of, on the outside of chasing happiness through achievement, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I started happier and started to open up myself to, you know, the practices of gratitude and kindness, and realize that you can't put those practices on top as a Band-Aid. You have to actually go through some of the pain. You have to feel what you feel first. And so I just went through a really rough time, kind of for the first time in my life, confronting all these difficult feelings inside. And it was kind of as cheesy as it is. I'm going to use it. It was like when the caterpillar thought he was about to die, became a butterfly. I really became pretty hopeless in many ways. And, you know, you couldn't tell on the outside. I'm a really good actress. You know, I was giving interviews in the New York Times about running happier. And on the outside was really in a dark place. And one of the ways that I think I went through that is I, for the first time in my life, started practicing compassion towards myself. One of the things I say is you cannot give what you don't have. And I was helping lots of people to feel joy, but I actually didn't allow myself to genuinely experience it. And part of this practicing compassion was I said, okay, I've always wanted to paint. I'm just going to let myself do it. And for my own birthday gift, I sent myself to Tuscany. That was my birthday gift to myself. I went to travel first, and then I went to a little painting retreat. It was watercolors, and it was me and like 7 basically professional watercolor painters from the UK. So I couldn't have been further out of my league. But what it did for me, what that experience did for me, is it just opened a faucet, and I've never been able, and not even tried, to turn it back. And I've been painting ever since. And the way, again, that it started is I allowed myself, through being compassionate towards myself, I allowed myself to do something I've always wanted to do for no other reason than it brought me joy. I dropped the story of, well, how does this fit into me being a CEO? I dropped the need to figure out how this was going to become a productive part of my life. I just was compassionate towards myself, and I allowed myself to do something that brought me genuine joy. And the impact on my life has been tremendous, and I'm happy to talk about that. But that's how, at the age of 40, art, something that was always part of me, but I didn't allow to emerge, became this huge part of my life, to the point where I call myself an artist. And I think people who knew me before are looking at me going, where did this come from? And people who are meeting me now can only imagine me this way. But that's my long answer. But I think important to kind of how something that brings me so much joy was so suppressed for a long time, and all that it required was for me to give myself permission.
Why do you think this happened? Your whole platform is about acknowledging the everyday little things that make you happy, why were you suppressing that in yourself?
What a great question. And it's funny, I've written, the happier community. Every other week I send an email to, it's a couple 100,000 people who are on the email list. And I've become really open and honest. And, I actually wrote an email about this, of kind of like, was I being a fraud? I wasn't practicing what I'm preaching. But here's the thing. It was, for me, I think I mentioned it briefly. I was learning, practicing gratitude and kindness and still am. But it gained this outward focus for me. I became a much kinder person towards others. I practiced gratitude and shared it with so many people. And it was amazing to change the lives. Hundreds of thousands of people have used Happier. And we've heard from so many of them how their lives have changed. And so I did practice gratitude and kindness, but I directed it outwards at others and neglected to do it for myself. And it's amazing to me how many times, and I've been very lucky. I get to interact with thousands of people and hear their stories of how often I hear the same story, that people are very kind to others, but we're not very kind to ourselves. And so for me, I think it was this moment when kind of everything crashed inside, when I realized that I cannot keep giving what I'm not giving to myself. The whole oxygen mask on the airplane, first on yourself and then on the person next to you. And this, we can dig deep into kind of my Jewish Russian upbringing, which is not, it's not a culture where we talk about joy. It's a lot of suffering and, by necessity. And it's a lot of fighting and it's a lot of fight and grin and bear it. And the idea for me of gratitude and kindness within myself, for myself, even as I was directing it outwardly, was still new and still something I couldn't approach, I guess, until I went through a pretty dark place where I realized it wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity.
I think for what it's worth, the question whether being a fraud or not, I think, as you mentioned, you're expressing it outwardly. So it was more about creating this platform to help others, and then along the way finding that it helped yourself.
Yeah, and that's I've even I've said this to the community that I used to think for a long time. I say this in my speeches too. I used to think I was really special. I was like very special in my suffering. So I was teaching gratitude and really practicing it outwardly and kindness, but really I couldn't really get rid of all this pain inside, that suffering. That was just, who I was, the experience I went through. And what I've shared with the Happier community is that as I started to open up more and share more authentically, the stories, the thousands of stories that people would write back to me, what they made me realize is I'm not special. It's not my suffering that makes me special. We all suffer in some way. We all struggle, and we all have in common our, the seeking of this feeling of genuine joy. And so by sharing myself and by sharing a lot of my pain with this amazing community, I've been given the gift of being able to let a lot of it go, because I think for many of us, and I know this from firsthand experience, sometimes we use this pain we feel or the suffering or fears, we use them as a shield to actually prevent ourselves from trying something new. And so you're absolutely right. I've been given this amazing gift of being able to share myself with this community and learning from them, and eventually getting to a place where I was able to give myself the gift of doing things that, bring me so much joy.
And how do you feel now? This is a very recent change, just a few months since you started painting, but you say it's like a faucet that opens and never closed. How has that changed you? How has that impacted your life?
Oh boy, I can't even, I'm going to take an hour talking about it. Cause you should see my face. To summarize, I guess I would say this. I think I'm not a different human being. I am so much more me. I cannot tell you how many people, and it's been art in conjunction with other things, right? Because once you start practicing compassion towards yourself, you realize all these different ways you can do it. But because I'm allowing myself to do something I love so much, I'm just much more joyful and relaxed as a human being. Probably one of the greatest ways I can express it. It was a few months ago. My husband was traveling and it was late. My daughter was getting ready for bed, and I'd, run down to the basement to do something in my studio. And she came down and I realized she was kind of watching me from the stairs, the basement stairs. And I turned around and I said, "Oh, sorry, babes, I'm coming." And she looked at me and she was just, kids, they say like the purest things. And she looked at me and she was like, "Mama, I just have to tell you, like, it's like you're a different person. Like, I don't know, you're like relaxed and you do all this art. And, I still know you work a lot, but you're not so tense all the time. Like, I don't know, just like wanted to tell you." And one of the greatest lessons I've learned is that, working on cultivating our own joy is the greatest gift we can give to people we love. And for her to say that to me, Mia, as my daughter, is the greatest love of my life, for her to see those changes, for her to voice them back to me, that's how I would summarize how it's impacted my life. I feel my life is so much more easy in a way, but not easy. Like, I feel at ease. I feel a sense of this excitable peace inside. There's a lot of vibrancy, but that's on a feeling level. But there's also these other effects. All these people from my life are reaching out to me who I haven't talked to in ages, who are seeing my art on Facebook or on Instagram. And they're reaching out and they're saying, I first of all, oh my God, I love it, but you've inspired me to try piano again. You've inspired me to paint. Somebody wrote to me, somebody I worked with, I wasn't even friends with, wrote to me that he's playing jazz piano for the first time in 20 years because he's seen me pick up my art. People unhappy are saying the same. And that's like a gift I cannot even describe, that my doing something that brings me joy has allowed me to inspire others. So that's been an amazing thing. And, a third way I would say is I'm sitting here in my house. It's beautiful. There's so much color and so much art. And I'm in the process of setting up an online gallery and kind of probably taking the next step of selling some of it and bringing it to people's lives. And so for me to be able to also make part of my living as an artist is something that I've never dreamed about, but I'm about to try my hand at. It's just, it feels like coming home, more than going somewhere else. And so, you hopefully can hear it in my voice. I can't describe the magnitude of the changes, other than to say it's, in many ways, it's like I peeled off a layer and there's all this vibrancy inside and I'm getting to share it. And, I don't know, it's pretty kick-ass. Can I say that on a podcast? Kick-ass?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, good.
You wrote, and I believe this was closer to when you started painting, that you fear to put yourself out there as an artist and to put your art out there. And I believe it was about a week ago that you spoke in public and you were painting on stage. And you said that was the most
that was crazy.
Frightening experience in your life.
Yeah.
How is this fear different now as you're embracing it versus a year ago when you were not embracing it? Is there a difference between those two fears or how you channel them?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it was probably the email. I wrote an email back to the happier list. It's an email. It's called Of Love or Fear. And I talked about it in the speech as well, which is when I painted. My whole life, a lot of people have called me fearless. I do try different things, but the thing is, that's actually not true. I think to be human is to experience fear. I don't think it's possible to not have fear. So it's not that I'm fearless. I have a tremendous amount of fear of failure, failure as an entrepreneur, as a mom, as a parent, as an artist. It's normal. It's who we are. But what I realized with art is that while I cannot get rid of the fear, there are two things. One is examining it and understanding, just being aware of what it is I'm fearing really helps. But it's also recognizing that it's not trying to get rid of it. It's accepting it, welcoming it, saying, okay, fear, I get it. You're here. Let's go. And it's really shifting into a different space. And I call it a space of love. And I'm not the first person to talk about it. And, I'm actually pretty tactical and concrete about it. It's when we shift from fear to love, we shift into a place of ourselves that's about trust and commitment and passion. Love is for something. Fear is of something. When we shift to a place of love, the fear is still here. I still have a lot of fear of what if my art really sucks? What if I try to sell it and no one buys it? What if people in my, professional circle are sitting there thinking, oh my God, she's really lost her mind. She's supposed to be this tech executive. What the hell is she doing with the art? I have the fear, but it's that I try to shift to a place of love, which is a place of, okay, I have the fear, but I am really passionate about my art. I have a lot of trust that if I do something that brings me so much joy, that it'll have a positive impact on others. I have commitment to doing something that I love. When I shift into that place, the fear is still there, but it's not primary. This place of love, this place of, Stephen Covey talked about scarcity and abundance mindset. Fear is a mindset of scarcity, of I don't know if I trust people to react well to my art. I sold this one piece, but I don't think I can ever sell again. That's scarcity. And love is abundance. Love is when we feel, if I have faith in what I'm doing, something will come of it, or I trust that people in my life will receive it well, or if I'm able to sell this one piece, I know there's more awesomeness to go around. And so it's less about moving the fear away or removing it, and it's more about shifting into this place of openness and passion for what I'm doing. And that's what I talked about, in this very corporate setting in New York at a large, billion-dollar company. As part of my talk on happiness, I talked about moving from fear to love. And then I said, guys, I was thinking about the way that I can really bring this point home. And the only thing I can think of is for me to actually show you what I mean. And I said, I just talked about all my fears about art and all my love for it. So I'm gonna illustrate it by painting live in front of you. And I took out my canvas was there. I brought these markers filled with acrylic paint because, so I didn't have to mix the paint and use brushes. And I put on this song. It's, I forget what it's called, but it's from a movie Drive. It's kind of this techno beat for 4.5 minutes. And I turn around and I paint these very vibrant, bright faces. And that's what I painted. It was the scariest and most incredible experience of my life. I literally was shaking because my body was like pulsating. And the energy in the room was so incredible. In the last minute, people just started clapping at once. I didn't initiate it. And it was mesmerizing. And to see people's faces, because it wasn't as so much about what I was doing. It's that I think everyone was realizing we all have these fears and we can bring them with us. We can accept we have them and shift into a place of love. It was an unbelievable experience. And I actually called my speaking agents after and I said, guys, I think part of the deal now is I have to do this as part of every speaking engagement because it was such a powerful way to show what I mean when I talk about genuine joy and moving from fear to love.
What's the future for your art? What do you think, if you can have your dream scenario, what do you think?
Oh, goodness. Well, you said the word dream, so I'd be lying if I didn't say I'd love to do a couple of things. I'd love to make part of my living from my craft of art, not because I do art for money, but because I want to be able to dedicate more time to it. And I do have a family to support. And I love when people make money from their craft because it's how we're able to create more of it. So that'd be one part of the dream. The second is I love art so much. I want to bring it to people in all sorts of different ways. Some people go to museums and some doesn't. So I want to do art outside. I want to be able to do murals. I'm thinking of a line of products with some of my art on it, so you can have it as part of your life. Everything from really cool bags to I want to create murals inside office spaces. I want art to become part of every single speaking engagement that I do, and I want to actually create art together with the audiences. I'm actually talking to someone about creating a series of events for people where it's art mixed with yoga, mixed with happiness, where we all do those three things together. So my biggest kind of summary of my dream is that art is part of every single thing I do personally and professionally.
All right, Nataly, now I want to move on to the rapid fire section, and I'm going to ask you a few questions about what makes you happy, and I just want your gut reaction. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Who makes you happy?
My daughter.
Is there a movie or a song that makes you happy?
Yes, the Thomas Crown Affair, the remake.
Finish the sentence. Happiness means?
Feeling that you're exactly where you are doing what you want to be doing at that moment.
Finish the sentence. I'm happiest when?
I am with my family, eating something awesome, walking something awesome, or doing something really creative together.
And what is the first happy memory you can remember?
My dad bribed someone to get me some bazooka gum when I was about 5 in Russia. We obviously had, no American goods. And my dad figured out on the black market how to pay someone way too much money so I could have some bazooka gum. I think each piece lasted me like 5 days because I would chew just tiny pieces of it. But it's one of my greatest moments of joy and gratitude for my dad. I'll never forget it.
Nataly, I'm so happy, and I can't say enough how happy I am that you joined me with this conversation and talk about everything that makes you happy. Is there anywhere where the audience can find you or anything you want to promote for people to find?
Yeah, I'd say 2 places. So you can check out Happier at happier.com. You can read all my content that we've talked about there. You can also download our app for your iPhone or Android. More than 700,000 people have shared about 8 million moments of gratitude there. And if you'd like to see some of my art, you can find me on Instagram. It's Nataly Kogan, one word, NATALYKOGAN.
And I'll make sure to add links to everything. Can you give us just a very brief description of the app? Because I think it's so in tune with this project that I want people to know a little more about it.
Absolutely. So the app, again, it's called Happier. It's for your iPhone, and we do have a beta for Android. I do apologize. It is a beta, so it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but it's based on the science of gratitude, which shows that establishing a grateful mindset and appreciating and capturing a few moments every day of what you're grateful for dramatically increases your health, reduces stress, anxiety, and contributes to your overall sense of well-being. So what people do in the app is they share things, the tiny, tiny moments that they are grateful for. And you can choose to make your account public or private. About 90% of all accounts are public because what we have found and what research finds is when you share something that brings you joy, you feel greater joy, and your tiny moment of gratitude can fundamentally shift how someone else's day is going. And that's the essence of what Happier and the Happier app is all about.
And I'll include links to that and the Instagram art that everyone should look at because it's wonderful.
Awesome.
So many great links. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Nataly, for sharing what makes you happy. I've been very inspired by your TED Talk and your website, and I'm very happy to get to chat with you. And I want to thank my friend Rose DeSanto for recommending Nataly. Thanks everyone for listening, and a special thanks to Jason Zapolo for editing this episode, Orly Margulies for help with social media, and Rocio Castañeda for ongoing support. You can get this episode and show notes at thehappypodcast.com/episode 33, and you can go to thehappypodcast.com for more information about this project, past episode, and a contact form. We're on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Happy Podcast, and our most recent episodes are on YouTube, youtube.com/thehappypodcast. If you like the show, please go to iTunes and subscribe so you can get weekly updates on your device. And if you want more people to learn about it, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. That's the best way to spread the word. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.